Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to MusicForever, where today we're reviewing Linkin Park's fourth studio album, 1,000 Suns. Before we get started with the actual review here today, I just want to remind anyone who may be new to my channel that I'm reviewing all of Linkin Park's albums here on my channel. The playlist with all the reviews that I've done so far is linked in the description, as well as it'll be on screen here at the end of the video. You can click on that, it'll take you right to that playlist where you can check out all my Linkin Park related reviews, and I highly recommend you do that after watching this review here. So getting into this review now for 1,000 Suns, and I just want to say before we actually get started with the actual review that 1,000 Suns is my favorite Linkin Park album, and I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion to have. For a good long period of time, this was the most hated Linkin Park album out of all of them. That is really until One More Light was released a couple months ago. So, you know, really, the fact that it's my favorite might anger some people, but, you know, I'm going to try to do my best here to explain why I do love this album as much as I do. And I do want to stress that I do really like this album. In fact, it's one of my favorites of all time, I would even have to say. Back when I was really getting into music, of course, Linkin Park was one of the first bands that I was really getting into. And this album in particular just really intrigued me. I liked all the stuff that was going on here on this project, and it would lead to me, you know, wanting to experiment and branch out into more different genres of music, just besides the rock music that I'd been listening to at the time. So getting started now with 1,000 Suns, I think that this project overall is another big step forward for Linkin Park compared to what they were doing before. Kind of as I said in my Minutes to Midnight review, the album was a bit more mature for Linkin Park. It kind of left behind the angsty, kind of anger-filled lyrics of their earlier two studio albums and replaced them with some more even introspective, more political, just some more mature lyrics overall, I would have to say. And 1,000 Suns kind of keeps up with that by having more mature lyrics, kind of like Minutes to Midnight, but also infusing a bit of politics and a bit of a concept-based album in here as well. I would say that 1,000 Suns is a concept album dealing with, you know, themes of nuclear annihilation and, you know, things of that sort. Of course, 1,000 Suns kind of being an expression used to describe, you know, like a nuclear bomb going off, the brightness is equal to like 1,000 suns or something along those lines. So, of course, that theme of, you know, like nuclear fallout and, you know, the likes of that are present throughout this project, just running throughout this album as a whole. There's not a story, I believe, going through this project. I just think it's a loosely tied concept of, you know, nuclear annihilation that's present here on this project. The instrumentation of this project kind of keeps up with the similar theme that Minutes to Midnight had, with kind of moving away from the nu metal, rap metal sound of their earlier works and moving in towards just a different sound, I would have to say. The sound here present on this project, it's quite diverse. There's lots of electronics thrown in here as well. However, the electronics really don't completely take over a lot of times. The rock elements of this band, and even just the hip-hop elements that were also present there in the beginning, are still very much present here on this project, but they're shown off in different ways than they were on like Hybrid Theory or Meteora, for example. And I think that's one of the strongest points here of this album. Now, I'm going to actually go through every track here on this project and explain, you know, just give a bit of a description why I like it. I don't typically do that for album reviews. I mean, I did happen to do it for my Minutes to Midnight review, but that was kind of by accident. I didn't intend to actually talk about all the tracks in that review. It just ended up being that way. So here, you know, let's just get started with really the first two tracks that we get here on this project. And the reason why I'm combining them together, the Requiem and the Radiance, that is because they're both not really complete songs. They're kind of just, I guess you would say, intermission, interlude type tracks, and there's a bit of these that pop up occasionally on the album. And that's another criticism I see thrown at this album constantly, is that there's too many of these tracks scattered throughout the project. And of course, I mean, yes, if you do look at the track listing and, you know, take these tracks that aren't really songs, there are a good amount of them present there. I can't agree to that fact. However, I do think that the actual songs present here on the project, just as well as the atmosphere that these kind of, you know, intermission type tracks provide, it all works nicely together to make a very nice album experience. And that's something that I don't think Linkin Park have really, I mean, all their albums do flow together nicely and do sound nicely when, you know, put together. They don't sound disjointed or anything like that. But I think this is the closest Linkin Park really come to having a very nice, you know, consistent, just album, if you know what I mean. This is the type of project that you want to listen to from start to finish every time, really, just because it has that sort of feel to it. And these first two, you know, tracks, if you will, the Radiance and the Requiem, the Requiem, really, the first song here, it's just some vocals that are, you know, kind of, I feel like they're pitch shifted to be, you know, high-pitched, almost feminine sounding. I'm not sure if it maybe actually was a female singing this guest part, or if it was Chester, you know, singing it, and then they, you know, manipulated his voice to sound the way it does here on this track. And it's just a very eerie opening to this album. And the Radiance that follows that has a, you know, samples a speech concerning, you know, nuclear war and things of that sort, which fits nicely with the whole theme of this album. After the opening, that's the Requiem, which is this very kind of creepy opening. We get this really kind of cryptic speech that's just sampled in there. And it's a nice start to this project. These two tracks put together. Maybe a tiny complaint that I have, and this is really nitpicking here. Maybe I would have combined these two into one track, just so we don't have to technically wait till track 3 to get an actual song here on this album. And I can see why some people might be a bit angered by that, but it's something that I'm able to look past just because everything that's provided here is as good as it is. Now, track 3, Burning in the Skies, is a track that I can definitely see why people maybe weren't super excited when they first heard it, because after Minutes to Midnight, which is a significantly slower album compared to Hybrid Theory and Meteora, and after you get past these two opening type tracks, you get Burning in the Skies, which feels like a track that could have fit onto Minutes to Midnight, to be honest. However, it does fit nicely into the context of this album as well. It's a bit slower of a track. It kind of moved itself very far away from the whole rap rock, new metal type sound that Linkin Park had going on for them earlier in the career, and decides to just have this bit more of a slower, more introspective moment to start this project. It's definitely not the most exciting, hyped up way to start a project. It's definitely no Paper Cut or Don't Stay in terms of the energy that it's providing. However, I do really like this track. I do like the more introspective lyrics. I do like how it ties in with the whole theme of nuclear kind of annihilation, of course, burning in the skies. And just looking at the lyrics, it's pretty obvious what they're going for here. But I do like how you can interpret the lyrics as being about other things as well. I like the guitar solo here on this track, and that's another thing about Linkin Park, and about the Minutes to Midnight review as well. I kind of mentioned there that in that album they really started doing more solos. It wasn't a ton, but it was noticeable there, and they kind of keep it up here on this album. It's with Burning in the Skies. The solo here on this track is very nice, and I really much enjoy it. It really does make this track a lot more interesting than it would have been without it. Next up, we have another one of these sort of intermission type tracks, which is Empty Spaces, which is really the short sort of track with just like crickets chirping, and just like some other voices that are going on in the background. It's really short, but it's kind of a nice thing to have in between Burning in the Skies and the following track, When They Come For Me, because both tracks do kind of have a bit of a different feel to them. Now, When They Come For Me is probably a very one of my favorites here, though I can really say that about much of this album. This track definitely goes for a more hip-hop flavored feel to it. It kind of reminds me of Hands Held High from Minutes to Midnight in that regard, in that Mike Shinoda is kind of taking over this track for the most part. His verses here are rather long. Definitely structured more maybe like a hip-hop song, to be honest. Maybe a more experimental or industrial hip-hop song as opposed to a typical sort of rap rock, rap metal, new metal type track, even though it does kind of have that aggression that's still present in Linkin Park's earlier material, and that's something I really like. The lyrics here are kind of dealing with addressing older Linkin Park fans that aren't really, willing to change and not really willing to accept Linkin Park's newer material because, it's different from Hybrid Theory and Meteora. I do really like some of the metaphors and stuff that he comes up with here in his verses. Just dissecting them is a ton of fun, to be honest. And then, of course, the chorus here that's provided by Chester. It's not really much of a sung part, more of this sort of, really sort of primal chanting that's going on here that kind of matches Mike's energy here. And it works together very nicely, in my opinion. Just the instrumental that Mike is rapping over is just so, just nasty and visceral sounding that it works really well within the context of this project. I love it. Next, we get Robot Boy, which is a track that I hear many people don't particularly like, and I can kind of understand why. And to be honest, when I first heard this song back when I was getting into this album, it was probably my least favorite track. However, I've grown to really like this song with time. It's a rather slow track, another, just slower Linkin Park song. But it builds up, and that's the thing I really like about this track. It starts off really slow with just the piano, really, and Chester's vocals, but it really builds up with time, adding some more instrumentation in there. Just the vocals become a lot more powerful towards the end, and it never becomes like aggressive or super in your face or anything like that. It still is a slow ballad type track all the way through. However, I do really like just how the build up works here on this song. I love the lyrics as well. Kind of how he sings in the chorus, "You're not gonna fight because no one will fight for you." I think it's really interesting, and it does tie in with the concept of the album rather nicely. And next we get an instrumental track, Jornada del Muerto, which I believe is Spanish for Journey of the Dead or Journey to the Dead, something along those lines, if my Spanish is correct there. And this is sort of the instrumental track here on the album. Many people might be tempted to say that it's just another kind of, interlude, intermission type track just because of the nature of it. However, Linkin Park, they're pretty known for having some instrumentals on their albums. All their studio albums, with the exception of their most recent one, One More Light, had instrumentals on them. And, Jornada del Muerto is this album's. And I think it's a rather interesting one as well. It's not one of my favorites, to be honest. I still do enjoy the track. However, I do like how it starts off a bit slower and kind of builds up with this sort of synth kind of sound. I'm not sure if it's like a keyboard or it's like a synth guitar or something like that. But I do like how it sounds. And it provides us a nice transition between Robot Boy and Waiting for the End because both of those tracks, while they are kind of, you know, both, I guess you could say, not super aggressive tracks, they are rather different sounding, and this track is a nice bridge between the two, so its placement on this album is rather nice in my opinion. And speaking of Waiting for the End, if you've seen my top 10 Linkin Park songs videos, you know that it's my favorite Linkin Park song. And, you know, really the reasons why I like this song, for one thing, I do like the more kind of somber, more introspective feel that it has. Mike's rapping here just sounds very energetic, very lively. I just like the flow that he has here as well. It's rather unique compared to some of the other tracks that he's on. And just another thing about this track, something that I don't even think I could have mentioned in my top 10 Linkin Park songs video. I kind of mentioned in that video how, you know, I just like the track, and I really couldn't explain why I like the track all that much. But in light of recent events, that being Chester Bennington's death, of course, and I've been trying to avoid talking about it in this series as much as I can, really, because, you know, I just don't want to make this completely about that, even though this series is kind of a tribute to him that I'm doing, but I have been avoiding talking about it in excessive detail. But when I hear tracks like Waiting for the End, I really can't help but not think about Chester, because of course, you know, just look at the lyrics. I was talking about waiting for the end, and how all he wants to do is trade this life for something new. Knowing, you know, what must have been going on in Chester's mind, it really does mean something completely different to me now, with, you know, what we now know. And of course, in the context of this album, of course, those lyrics could be taken to mean something completely different. Of course, being about, you know, nuclear annihilation, nuclear, just you know, just death in general. Of course, it could be kind of seen as someone, you know, just waiting for the end in like a time period where, you know, there's just nothing good going on just because of all this war and nuclear annihilation and things of that sort. But, you know, looking at the lyrics, if I could speak, that would be nice. I don't even know what I did just there. But, you know, knowing what we know now, the lyrics have multiple meanings to them, and that's the thing I really like about this song as well. I just love the feel of this song, and, you know, to this day, it still is my favorite Linkin Park song. And immediately following my favorite Linkin Park song, we actually have my second favorite Linkin Park song. How funny is that? And it's Blackout, a really underrated Linkin Park song in my opinion, just because I love the structure of this track and all the new things that it kind of does. It starts off with this very ominous and creepy kind of keyboard part before launching into a very aggressive vocal delivery by Chester Bennington. And, you know, for the longest time, I was really drawn to this aggressive part, and I really couldn't put my finger on why exactly I was drawn to it. However, it occurred to me after, you know, repeated listens that the reason was because, despite the fact that, you know, you have Chester, you know, screaming a ton here, you know, like he typically did on older Linkin Park records, the reason why it stands out as being different from those older moments where he was doing, like, similar screams and things of that sort is because the instrumentation that he's, you know, yelling over is very different. Back on those older albums where he was doing this very aggressive delivery, the instrumentation was very aggressive as well. You have angry guitars and drums and keyboards and things like that. Whereas here, you just have this very eerie kind of keyboard part that he's, you know, screaming over. And it's a very interesting, like, juxtaposition between the instrumentation and the vocal delivery, which I just think is really cool, to be honest. And then towards the middle of this track, you got this crazy breakdown provided by Mr. Han, the DJ for this band. He just kind of takes Chester's vocals from the first part and mashes them up over this very aggressive instrumental type part, and it's just very aggressive. You know, whereas the first part of this track, you know, has the aggressive vocals and the more, you know, kind of laid back instrumentation, I guess you could say. This middle part is just all out aggressive, to be honest. And then in the last third of this part of the track, you have a very kind of bit of a switch up, to be honest, because it kind of, after this aggressive middle part, it kind of fades away for a bit, and you have that really kind of basic kind of keyboard part from the beginning kind of come back, and you have Mike and Chester then singing with, you know, their kind of clean vocals, very kind of soft, and it's still very eerie, especially put over this instrumentation. This ending part where they're singing together in unison is really kind of creepy, to be honest. And that's the thing I like about Blackout. You have all these different vocal things going on here. The instrumentation's all over the place, but it's tied together so nicely, and there's so much interesting stuff going on here on this one track. The fact that this song doesn't get enough attention in the Linkin Park, you know, I guess you could say fan community. I really hear this track talked about a ton. Just, you know, it hurts my heart, to be honest, because this is such a good song. The following song, Wretches and Kings, is also another great one. It has another more aggressive sound to it as well, a very industrial sort of hip-hop feel to it as well. The verses, of course, being rapped by Mike Shinoda here. And this track, if any song here on this album, is most, you know, reminiscent of Linkin Park's earlier sound with the rap verses and sung chorus. However, it distinctly has an identity to it that makes it, you know, fit into A Thousand Suns. Not just with the lyrics kind of dealing with political themes, but also just kind of the more industrial sort of feel that it has in the instrumentation. You also get some sampled speeches that are incorporated into this track as well, which work very nicely. Typically, I'm not a big fan of having like speeches or things like that sampled on songs. However, the delivery of the speech, the more aggressive delivery, and the way it's just mixed into this track just works very nicely in my opinion. So overall, I'm perfectly okay with it. Next, we get another kind of intermission type track with Wisdom, Justice, and Love, which just takes a speech clip from Martin Luther King Jr. and kind of takes it, repeats it over and over again. The only thing is the more he says like his part, the more robotic and sort of evil it sounds. And that's a really kind of interesting thing to have. You know, Martin Luther King Jr., a figure who's just known for being like a figure of love and compassion, and kind of changing his voice so that he sounds, you know, robotic and evil, almost like Megatron or something. It's weird, like Megatron Luther King Jr. I couldn't make this up if I tried, to be honest. And then we have the track Iridescent, which is the next song here. And this is another slower track. And I do really like how this track, kind of like Robot Boy, has a bit of a build-up to it. However, it does have a personality of its own. You have Mike and Chester singing here on this track, which sounds very nice. And at the end, they all just kind of come together. And it's a very nice, you know, union between the two vocalists doing their thing. And overall, it's just a very solid track in my opinion. Probably not one of my favorites on the album overall, but it still is a very good song, don't get me wrong. And then we have another sort of intermission type track with Fallout. And I feel like this track here is meant to be compared to the opening track, Requiem, because Requiem takes vocal samples from The Catalyst, the track that follows Fallout, and he manipulates those at the start of the album. And Fallout here, towards the end of the album, takes vocal parts from Burning in the Skies, which is from the beginning of the album, and manipulates those vocal parts. So I kind of see that these two tracks do the same thing, just with, you know, different songs from different points on the album, which is kind of cool, to be honest. And here it takes lyrics from Burning in the Skies, like I said before, has them kind of, you know, had effects put on them, and eventually towards the end, the effects wear away, I guess you could say, and you just hear Mike Shinoda kind of singing the lyrics, which is kind of a nice creepy thing to do, especially leading into The Catalyst, which is another one of my favorite songs here on the album, and the first song I heard from this project, the song that really got me interested in hearing the rest of this album, and just a very cool song overall. I like the build-up at the beginning of this track, how it just starts off with them almost like chanting this one part over and over again, slowly adding more guitars and synths in there, just getting more energy towards the middle of this track, where you have this sort of climax and release of energy where it just almost sounds like nuclear bombs going off everywhere. That's kind of what I feel that this track in this middle part is. This track here, it feels like this is the apocalypse almost. Like this is the bombs going off. Everything else has just been building up to this point. The political unrest, you know, just the waiting for the end. And here on The Catalyst, this is where it all happens. And, you know, the first part of the track is kind of the build-up. Then this middle part where just the synths and guitars and everything goes crazy, that's the bombs going off. And it's, you know, crazy, like I said before. And at the end, everything kind of cools down again. And we have this more soft vocal singing part. And it's just very beautiful in a sense, but very almost tragic sounding as well. And that's the thing I really like about this track. Kind of like Blackout, it goes through several different phases. However, it still manages to be a very consistent track as a whole and offer a lot that you may not get anywhere else. Some people may not like it because, you know, the heavy use of synths, kind of like that in the rest of this album as well. However, I think the synthesizers are used very nicely here on this track, and they provide a lot of tension to this song, and I really like it. And then we get the closing track following The Catalyst, The Messenger. And this song is a bit of a departure from the previous songs on the album, whereas the other previous songs, kind of like I mentioned before, were very electronic leaning in many regards. The Messenger is very stripped back and, you know, acoustic really. It's just Chester and acoustic guitar really throughout this song. And, you know, symbolically throughout this album, I feel like all the synths and everything is kind of like the nuclear kind of warfare and everything like that. And after the apocalypse, that is The Catalyst, we're left with, you know, starting over again, and everything's a lot more natural. Hence the acoustic guitar and just, you know, Chester's very, you know, I guess you could say visceral vocal performance here on this track. Despite the fact that he's doing sort of a softer, sadder ballad type track, his vocals sound very harsh here on this song. He's obviously, I feel like he's not trying to, you know, sound his most soft or sad or anything like that. He sounds angry even here at moments, just with the way he delivers his vocals. And, you know, some people may not like how he sounds over this more, you know, laid-back sounding instrumental. However, I do really like it. It does almost feel like the sorrow from the end of, you know, the apocalypse, that it's the catalyst, but it also does have a lot of hope moving forward. Of course, him talking about love and things like that here on this track. It's a nice closing song in my opinion, and it ties up the album nicely. So that's my take pretty much on every track on 1,000 Suns. And, you know, in explaining all that, I think it's pretty clear why I like this album as much as I do, and why I think it's Linkin Park's best album. It just, like I said before, it flows together nicely. It's a nice album type of album that you want to listen to from start to finish. there's a lot of diversity here in the tracks. You have some softer songs like Robot Boy or Burning in the Skies or Iridescent. You have some more aggressive tracks like Blackout or When They Come For Me or Wretches and Kings. You have some more hip-hop leaning tracks like the beforehand mentioned When They Come For Me and Wretches and Kings. You have the more rock leaning tracks, the more electronic leaning tracks. There's lots of stuff going on here on this album. If you like Linkin Park, chances are you're going to like something here on this album. And while many fans, I can understand not liking certain aspects of this project because it may be different from what they wanted, really, there definitely is something, at least here on this project, that you should enjoy just because, you know, they have so much going on for them here. Now, to be honest, the reputation of this album, I have seen improved over the years, to be honest. Even just comparing myself back in 2013 when I got into Linkin Park and when I discovered this album, the reception towards this album compared to now, it's noticeably a lot better now. Lots of people kind of look back on this album, I feel, and say, you know, it wasn't as bad as I initially thought, or it's actually pretty good. Now, of course, I was always on board, at least from when I first heard it in 2013, like I said before. But, you know, from the moment I was on board, I've always been defending this album, and I think it is a great project. Definitely one that you should check out if you're a Linkin Park fan, because there is a lot going on here. And, you know, I spent too much time already as it is explaining why in the track section. So definitely check this one out, guys. Make sure you don't not do so. And while you're here, make sure you guys leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future Linkin Park videos. Like I said before, all the previous ones I've done are linked in the description and will be on screen here at the end of the video. Comment down below your thoughts here on the album. Follow me on all the social medias linked in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.